Now we'll just connect the rest. Okay, again, this is neck. Let's put these guys out, like out, so that these two don't get in the way. All right, let's just tuck it in somewhere like this. Okay, so neck goes here. There you go. Sure, it's nice and secure. Alright, this is for the bridge. Let's get it out of the way. This one too. Okay. Ah! There you go. Alright, so now we can tuck it in, but not yet. Okay, we still have this stray ground over here, so we can yank this out of the way. There you go. Yeah. Alright, and then get it attached to one of those lugs. Okay, and then we have your ground connection for the tremolo. Alright, and then additional ground wires, and we're done. Alright, so let's okay, so before we end this segment, I'd just like to point out a few things concerning some changes or some adjustments that I had to do with this build because of some things that I discovered along the way. Alright, so regarding the pod itself, I do not know if this was a design by the guys at Seymour Duncan, but the two middle wires, the two gray wires, for some reason when I was trying to attach the single coil wires to it, it seems that these two gray wires are actually connected together, or they're connected. So that means that the gray wires here, if you look at the Seymour Duncan website, they correspond to the bare wires that come with their pickups. So they're grounds basically, and in this particular setup, they seem to be connected to each other. So I don't know. I had to switch around the wires so that the green wire now becomes the hot wire for the single coil, so you can see there, and the gray wire now serves as ground. Alright, because in the original configuration, gray was the hot wire, green was the ground. Unfortunately, the other two green and gray wires I had to solder together, solder, whatever, to ground. Alright, so that they don't mess around with the wiring and stuff. Alright, so I had to switch them. Everything else is the same. Alright, red wire goes to the switch, white wires go to the 5-way selector, and then the black wires go to ground. Okay, nothing changed there. So, and second of all, if you look at here, if you could like zoom in a bit, come on. If you notice the tone cap, all right, this is one thing that I like to pay attention to. All right, the Liberator was designed as a volume pot. Okay, but that doesn't mean that you can't use it as a tone pot. For example, in this case, I wanted to use it as a tone pot for reasons I mentioned a while ago about this guy, this switch. Okay, so this guy right here, all right, by default, the potentiometer underneath has one lug connected to ground. So the way that the tone pot works in this circuit is that it's an open circuit, all right, and depending on the resistance of the pot, treble will bleed to the capacitor. Okay, but that requires that the exits, or for the lack of a better term, have to be open. All right, have to be open. So because the lug itself is by default connected to ground, I cannot attach the tone cap or the tone cap ends, both of them, in either the ins or outs, because if I do that, okay, the treble will bleed by default. Okay, or worse, depending on how I wired it, the guitar signal will bleed by default, and this guy will become by default a second volume pot. So I did have to solder it, all right, to the end of the bleed from the volume pot, and then one end will be attached to the out of the pot, so that it acts like the same way as it would if it were a normal potentiometer. Okay, so those are the two things I had to adjust to. This pot, this capacitor, having to be soldered to the end of the bleed from the volume pot, and then screwed into the out lug of the Liberator, and the wires for the single coil have to be reversed because for some reason the gray wire serves as ground. Okay. Alright, so now that we're done with the actual unboxing and the actual installation of this product, I'd just like to share some pros and cons, some impressions that I had with this guy. The pros. One of the big things that I liked about this is that because the mod itself is internal, the general look of the guitar doesn't really change. I mean, that's a given because it's the product itself is situated at the back of a volume pot or a tone pot. But again, it's a mod that I wouldn't mind doing to a lot of guitars, or it's a mod that I don't mind doing if I actually like the look of the guitar, but I want the convenience of being able to remove pickups on the fly without having to solder at all. So that's a big plus. Number two, it might look big if you notice the way we installed the actual product, but it's actually really small. It's only the thickness of a regular large potentiometer plus one, a little bit. And if you notice, the inside of this as a guitar is really tight. All right, I personally had a really hard time getting a lot of things crammed inside this cavity, but it fits, and that says a lot about how well designed the product is. Now, of course, another pro would be, again, the solderless connections. That's great. I don't have to fire up this soldering iron again, hopefully, if I do plan on changing the pickups on this guy. Now for the cons. As I mentioned a while ago, this was designed to be a volume pot. It's good, all right? But if I'm going to use it as a tone pot, for instance, if I say I want a switch for a volume pot, and I want to be able to change tone caps on the fly, for instance, like, for example, in this case, this guy has a master tone. So we know this is subject to debate, but some people want to experiment with the capacitors that go to the tone control. And I know we can go into all this debate about, you know, what sounds best and blah blah blah, but that's another area where people actually mod their guitars with the tone cap, all right, and they switch tone caps on the fly. And I would have wanted that possibility without the need to solder as well. So that's killing two birds with one stone. You get the advantage of the terminals to switch pickups on the fly, and if only the pot was designed so that there's a product variation where the potentiometer was wired like a tone pot is wired, then we have the ability to also change the tone caps on the fly. I mean, these things are relatively delicate. I mean, if you don't know how to handle the iron, you're going to destroy capacitors. Some of those really old NOS capacitors are expensive. All right, so that's one area of concern. I can, in theory, like snip the ends, but you know, I wouldn't really want to be doing that with this guy. Okay, I mean, pay the price for that pot. Might as well, you know, use the pot as is. What else? What else? Well, that's about it. I mean, it's an amazing piece of kit. It allows for solderless connections. Anybody now with this guy installed inside the guitar can virtually do the most common mods that a lot of players do to their guitars, like changing pickups. So if you're the type that changes pickups on the fly, you know, just want to experiment with different configurations, because that's one of the easiest ways to change the tone of your guitar without having to do anything drastic. It's now a very easy task to do with this guy. All right, you don't have to fire up a soldering iron anymore, hopefully, unless you're actually going to reconfigure wiring inside your guitar. But if changing pickup is all you're going to do, this guy is really big help. Okay, so very highly recommended. I really hope that we see this product. I mean, I was trying to look for this guy in stores here, and I had to get this overseas. So hopefully we see this. A lot of modders, I think, will really appreciate something like this inside the guitars that they're working with, or their personal guitars. So very highly recommended. It's really nice. Good job, great job, love it.